Hello everyone, my name is Jakub Stokalski. I'm the project lead and lead designer at 11-Bit Studios, and today I'd like to give a short talk about the quite an obvious theme that might be present for everyone involved in the game industry, especially the creative side and design art side, and that is on ideas, concepts, and other imaginary beasts. Right? This is a curious topic because in my experience with multiple teams, especially those of smaller sizes, it's usually said that that ideas are everywhere, right? And everyone can have an idea. But our experience here at 11-Bit Studios is actually quite to the contrary. Yes, everyone can have an idea, and yes, they are quite plentiful. Although there is a huge gap between just having an idea and having it play well with what you want to achieve, both creatively and business-wise. And that's why I'd like to talk more about what really an idea is, right? And what can we expect of it, and how can we maybe learn to work on them more consciously. So the common misconception, or rather the common point of view, is that ideas are cheap and everyone can have them, right? And granted, that is true to some extent, right? When contributing to game development, most team members come with different ideas, concepts, how to achieve the vision, how to achieve the success of the project, and these are very valuable. Well, at least they are valuable when they are, right? But they can be judged based on their merits and how they contribute to solving a problem, achieving more gameplay fun, what have you, right? But actually, when you have ideas about the larger scale of things, when we're talking about ideas for games, then yes, everyone can have them. But then, when you have this idea and you start building it and you start developing the game, then actually, you have to survive in the marketplace in the end, right? So in this sense, while from a purely creative standpoint, just having ideas might kick your gears going, it will not be something that will get you over the finish line. If we define the finish line as successfully launching the project that will be received well and played by a lot of people and enjoyed by them, right? So the common way of going about how do we differentiate ideas for games and concepts for games is obviously the idea of innovation, right? We want to innovate. We want to differentiate ourselves from other games out there because this will make it stand out. This will make it pop, right, and explore and give us some foothold into the success for the project as a whole. But innovation is a really heavily used word, right? And what really it is, as I like to repeat, right? Innovation to me is new stuff that doesn't suck. And when you think about this and you think about concepts for new games that will try to be truly innovative in this sense, then it is truly quite possible to get ideas for new stuff. But this doesn't suck part is the tricky part, right? Because, you have to define what that exactly means and how do you place yourselves against the marketplace, right? But then doesn't suck relates intuitively to the way you delivered the game, right? Is it a good game in the end? And that's very true. However, in our experience at 11-Bit Studios, it's also very true that not all ideas and not all concepts are created equal. And it's not granted that all high concepts for a game are equally valid. So obviously, when we're talking about the low-level innovation that goes into making a game, then it's, the game development projects are full of it, again, right? The ideas and the novelty that goes into realizing the game itself, be it through art, design, technology, marketing, publishing, whatever department that goes into making the game from start to finish, that's something very true and very real, right? But this low level, this bottom up approach to to novelty is only one way of thinking about things. Because in the end, if you're talking about contribution of different disciplines into the whole project, it's very valid and very important. But the player experience in the end is indivisible, right? You cannot say, well, the art is so innovative in this game, but the gameplay is quite, it's shit, right? So it will not make the whole concept click together if you just look at it from a point of view of your domain of expertise, right? So, and that goes for all of them, including design, in my experience, right? It's commonly said that what you should do is, look for fun first, right? And iterate some just to get gameplay going. And that is very true. I want to stress it. It is important to get great gameplay in, right? But you cannot, at least if you're going about making games as we are, as I like to show you on two examples on the next slides, you cannot just judge them purely based on merit of fun or engagement, right? Because actually making a high concept work is much more than that. And I like to explore it in a second. So just to wrap this introductory part here, what I like to stress is it is true that ideas are a dime a dozen in a sense, right? You could have multitude ideas, but it's not true that all are created equal, right? Good ideas are worth millions, and bad ideas not so much, right? This is obviously taking apart the whole discussion about execution, which is a big topic in and of itself. But today I'd like to focus on concepts, right? And that is something central to the way we at 11-Bit Studios here approach thinking and going about making our own games, but also evaluating games from third parties in our publishing department, right? We are always looking for a strong concept in a game. So we might ask, what really is a concept, right? And this is what I like to show you, because if you think about it, it's not really that obvious, right? What's concept? It's one of these terms that get intermixed with innovation, ideas, and just having ideas, being the idea guy, right? Which is kind of an insult, I suppose, in many areas of game development, right? Just being an idea guy. And I would like to somewhat demythologize it, because yeah, sure, just going around and piling stuff on top of other people's work is the bad kind of being an idea guy. But I would argue today is that ideas are very important on the high and on the low level, and just to reframe it, to stick away from thinking about this common understanding of an idea guy, I'd like to reframe it as concepts, right? So the process we go about at 11-Bit Studios of delivering it is actually, it kind of solidified very much throughout the past, I'd say 5 years, 6 years, very, pretty much from the moment the company worked on This War of Mine, which was a very, pretty high concept game, right? It had a very solid vision going for itself, right? And there's been, what I'll be showing to do is kind of a systemization of what we are always looking at internally, but and only a part of it, but one that relates mostly to concepts. But I kind of systemized it so that we can talk about them, about parts that go into verifying whether your idea is a concept or is just a nebulous thing. And these 4 elements that I like to talk to today about is the insight, the statement, the question, and gameplay. And we'll see what it all means. Starting with insight, and this might sound a term if you are familiar with the terms relating to marketing and basically product development, then the insight might be familiar to you. And if it's not, the way we think about it when we are developing the concepts for our games, looking for these insights in games of third-party developers, is exactly something, a question that gets you going, right? What truth about reality gets you going, right? What observation would you want to base your game on? These are the questions that we kind of try to ask ourselves at the very beginning, because they are the inspiration and the spark that we judge the rest of the process on, right? And this is very important, especially for us, right? Because 11-bit Studios, if you don't know our work, it includes the two largest games of ours are This War of Mine and Frostpunk. Both of them, and we like to think about our approach to making games as making meaningful entertainment, right? What exactly is this, right? It's the kinds of experiences that do not have fun as the defining factor, right? They could be fun, obviously, but they don't have to be, in the sense, as long as they engage and provoke and make you think about different things. This War of Mine was a game about civilians in wartime. Frostpunk was a game about society pushed to the limit and what it's going to do to survive. The three large internal development projects that we currently do all have a very strong insight at their core that will explore different aspects. And these are the very foundations, right? These are the things that we come back again and again to when developing the high concept and then going into design and building the whole game. Is it truly relevant to what we want to say, right? As creators and hopefully make everyone excited about asking themselves these types of questions. So, like I said, for This War of Mine, I'll intertwine this presentation with examples exactly from these two games, right? This War of Mine, which was a breakout for the whole company pretty much when it launched, and from Frostpunk, which was an equally huge success built on a larger scale, basically. So for this one, This War of Mine, the insight that got everyone, creatively inspired about this project was this sudden realization that, which is kind of obvious to think about it, but if you look at the marketplace and the games as a medium, wasn't really explored, right? That in war, not everyone is a soldier. Sure, we have tons of war-oriented games, right? Probably the majority, but they all focus on the thrills and the thrills of being a combatant, right? Of force, of gaining power, of pushing your needs on top of others' needs. And this was actually reversal of this whole approach, right? In war, not everyone is a soldier, and if you're not a soldier, if you're a civilian in a besieged city, well, then you really have a truly different set of concerns on your head than in your usual war-oriented game. And this insight got the questions going, right? What if we made a game, the team that was making it, if we made a game about civilians in wartime? For Frostpunk obviously came after This War of Mine, so we were kind of the company was in a different place after the success of This War of Mine. So the thinking was, how can we continue in this vein of making these thoughtful things, and not do a sequel, because This War of Mine was a kind of an experience that we no one really truly believed how can we do it justice by making a sequel. So a spiritual successor, right? And then this spiritual successor thinking went into the area of that survival really matters at scale. If you're thinking about a apocalyptic scenario, then whether someone survives, this or that particular person, from a point of view of a species or from a point of a culture or civilization, survival matters only if you're bulky enough, right, to survive. So that was the insight that sparked the work on Frostpunk. And how it developed is actually the next step of developing the high concept of the game. And that's a statement, right? It's basically you're taking the insight and you're thinking, how do I build on top of this from the building blocks of the language of games, right? How does genre, world, how does the rules support the core questions? And this is particularly important because we are, I wouldn't say we are a young medium, although we are younger than a lot of the media out there, and it is we often get inspired by these other media, and rightfully so, because they have lots of experience going for them. But at the same time, games do have their own language, right? And it's important to think, how can we explore the insight and the statement using the language of games? Our aim at 11-bit Studios has always been to explore these subjects not through linear narrative or narrative at all, right? Or tools that are available to books, to movies, to comic books, all of these other media who are great in what they do. games are great at having player co-authorship of the final experience. And this is something, that's why reframing the insight in a statement that uses game language, uses the building blocks of games, enables us to see how this particular insight could be explored by gameplay, not by story, not by arts, apart from gameplay, right? Gameplay being the thing that integrates all of these things that I just mentioned. So for this war of mine, this concretization of the nebulous insight was to make a game, a survival game about civilians in wartime, right? What I mentioned before, if you are a civilian in the besieged city, then the class of problems and challenges and things that you have to do in order to survive is very different to all the other games out there, right? So a survival genre was quite natural. And now obviously the big question is how to use survival genre tropes to make this deep and meaningful experience, right? And it was the whole other story of actually delivering on this, right? But the fact to be able to frame it that way was crucial for the success of the project as a whole. These elements that would end up being used, right, was having a shelter, scavenging, and focusing on people rather than resources and mechanics. It is true, obviously, there's some foundation of this needs to be there just to have the gameplay engine going, right? But it was not the goal in and of itself, right? And this is actually a good example of how looking from a low-level innovation, for instance, in design, right, or having novel ideas just from a purely design standpoint can lead you astray, because you could come up with great ideas for survival loops and mechanics that completely omit the pillars that will build into this experience of civilians in wartime, right? For instance, it'd be great if you could like go out and scavenge and throughout the whole city and pile up tons of resources. But that would be completely to the contrary to the experience of being a civilian pressed for survival in a besieged city. In Frostpunk, the statement was, reframing of the insight in a game language was to try to make a society survival game where you build the last city on Earth, right? Again, spiritual successor and all that, right? We knew that the survival genre is still valid. It's just on a different scale. That's why the society is there, right? And when you build the last city on Earth, that immediately puts us in this city building genre. And again, with the building blocks that were chosen and were thought to fit well with the insight were exactly city building, so preparing this arc that will carry humanity forward, society management as a crucial part of exactly looking at survival at scale, and survival mechanics again, right? Because this is whole in the context of freezing apocalypse, basically. So when we do have these statements, another step that is quite important for us, since we want to make games that challenge you to think about things that you might not have thought about otherwise, right? And it's unique to the games, at least that's how I define them, right? Is that the insight and the statements that you're using these elements to build a question. It's often said that that linear media have a statement, authorial statement in mind. Some of them have, some of them don't have this, right? But in general, the author has something in mind where he's building the product that he's making, right? His thing, right? And to me, the biggest difference between doing linear media and doing games is the fact that, like I mentioned, player co-authorship of the narrative understood as the totality of the things that happen in the game. And that's why if you want to say something, you can't really just have a statement, right? Because that would put you in the realm of just making, linear story, right? You have to ask questions. Pose interesting questions that the player will be able to answer for him or herself through the gameplay mechanisms that you build. And these types of questions really have to resonate well with the insight, right? So for this war of mine, it was how far are you willing to go to survive, right? Are you willing to steal, kill, beg, just to make the small group under your care to survive, right? Or is it a line, or is there a line that you will not cross to try to survive the ordeal, right? That wartime, being a civilian in wartime brings. For Frostpunk, again, the scale came in kicking, and that's, you know, what society is capable of when pushed to the limit. It might be a very similar question, but actually it puts you at a completely different level of the subject matter, as we'll see down the line. Because when you now have the question, you can start thinking about the gameplay. And by gameplay, I mean the broad thing, right? My background is design, obviously, right? But in a project leadership role, you have to think the big picture, and the big picture is making art, design, technology, and all of the different disciplines work in concert to create a coherent gameplay experience, right? That's why it's gameplay. And when you're thinking like this, you know, then what are your core gameplay pillars, right? How are they connected to your insight? And this is the moment, only now, when we are starting to think about concrete realizations, concrete ideas that will deliver on the concept. And to me, this is the moment that it's safe to start thinking about these low-level ideas, because you have the guardrails in place in the form of insight statement questions, right? Because now you know what you're trying to achieve. Then you can start focusing your creativity, and the creativity, every team member can start focusing his or her creativity in the area that will best build towards the intended experience. So in terms of this war of mine, this gameplay was about survival and difficult choices, as I already mentioned. Frostpunk was a bigger game in scope and in genre, so city building, survival gameplay, difficult choices again in the form of Book of Laws and society came in as the core gameplay pillars that will be expanded upon to deliver the question that stems from the insight in the statement. So these are the four elements, right? The insight, the statement, the question, and gameplay. Now, you might get the impression that the whole process is linear, right? That you start from insight, go into statement, question, gameplay. It's, you know, as more seasoned creatives know, it's rarely that, right? It's more often you are inspired by something completely out of the blue, and it just doesn't leave you, and you just want to see where it goes, right? And you can follow this thread to start looking for interesting things, right? So where does it lead you? And that's a perfectly, you know, the healthy creative process. I'm not implying by showing you this that these are the steps and the checklist that you need to go through to get, you know, a great game idea. That's not true, right? Creativity, human creativity doesn't work like this. However, I would challenge you to think about when you're like going down the line with whatever inspired you into making the game that you want to make, is to try to think about these four elements that I just described and see whether you have answers for them, right? Because this is basically the use of it. It's a compass, it's a map, it's a tool for maintaining direction in the 2, 3, 5 years of game development when you're daily making, you know, choices about stuff. It's a way for you to stay on track, basically. So obviously, making new stuff that doesn't suck is a process of discovery, right? So it's by no means demeaning approaches of being, you know, innovative, surprise from whatever direction you take inspiration from. You know, if it works, it works. However, this tool is meant to challenge you to develop your idea, whatever made you inspired, into this something that you can verbalize. And if you can verbalize, then the thesis is that you know where to look, right? And it's more important because you need to be able to describe why should people care, right? And that's both true on the outside, obviously, right? And why should anyone care about the game that you're making? But also, it's equally important towards the inside, especially on larger teams, right? Why is it that we're making it in this particular way? Why is it important, right? What are the elements that you want to people not to lose from sight, right? So obviously technical innovation, art innovation, design innovation, all of these disciplines sparked amazing things in games, and it's by no means saying that these are not important. They are super important. But this perspective that I just described to you might be unique to us in the sense that our mission and our vision for ourselves at 11-Bit Studios is to make games that are meaningful to the audience, right? That they somehow relate and get inspired and get thinking about the subject matter through this language of games, right? And to this, it is our experience internally that this kind of tool, like thinking about these things and making sure that they are solid very early on in the process, ensures that we have a tool to talk about whatever unconsciously gets us going in the creative, chaos that is creativity. To communicate and drive the vision, because ultimately this is the only way that you get anything out the door, right? So obviously, I wouldn't presume that this is the only way to do it, but that is what works for us, right? And I would highly encourage you, if it's something that's interesting. Sounds interesting to try these questions, because the experiences of our publishing department is that it is not really that easy to find well-defined, well-rounded concepts. It's surprisingly difficult to find the maturity, both of the team and of the concept that would fit these types of things that we internally and externally in publishing are looking for. So I would like to close out with, because why even focus and try to do it like this, right? Even for us and ourselves, the thing is that I personally think that the business is very mature. I said that this is one of the youngest media, and that's true, but also it's not that young, right? It's been a while, and it's huge, right? We all know that the business as a whole is huge. I think that there will be no Citizen Kane in the sense that there will be one breakthrough that will put gaming on the pedestal and whatever, right? That's not going to happen. Depending on your definition, either there will be no Citizen Kane, or there already been several, right? So that's why I think it is high time that we as creators start respecting those who we are speaking to, and we respect ourselves in the sense that we say things that are worthwhile, right? And this is something that gets me going personally, and everyone at 11-Bit Studios. So I would highly encourage you to think about it. Thanks, everyone, and see you around.